Welcome back to the 4am Report. This week, we're continuing a series on deciding whether podcasting is for your brand or personal brand, especially if it's been mandated. I've heard from people quite often in the last 6 months that, my boss thinks we should be making a podcast and I'm trying to figure it out. And so if that is your circumstance, if a podcast is on your plan for 2022, there are a few things that you want to be thinking about to business case it and see whether this works for you, because I'm not going to lie to you. Podcasting is long game. You're very, very unlikely to see movement and dollars in bank. It's not like a campaign that you can go put a bunch of Facebook ads up and you're like, this much extra traffic came to my website and so many people bought my program. That is totally not the attribution that you're going to see from podcasting. Instead, it's a flywheel where you will find it really difficult in the first 6 months in particular to set it up and work with it. But then there's long-term results to be had that can go way, way beyond the initial sort of publishing. So with that in mind, in this short episode, I wanted to curate a bunch of clips for you. It's conversations between Will Lamont and I, in which we're talking about the lesser leveraged side of podcasting. I think if you've heard the previous episode 158, you will have gotten some thoughts on how to take an episode and break it up into multiple pieces, i.e. make it micro. And more people are becoming proficient at that. Perhaps what lacks is the reverse. Like, how do you take a lot of podcasts and macro, like take it up, like how do you consolidate it into larger pieces, various different things? And again, I'd argue like you can start as simple as like roundup emails that go out like once a month to talk about some of the themes discovered in your podcast. And it can go all the way up into like a book, which is kind of what we've done, where from asking people for 150 episodes, what keeps you up at night on the marketing front, we uncovered all kinds of humor and wit and charm and, self-deprecation. And it gave us like some insight into humor and entertainment. And that's what's kind of like formed the basis of the deeper chapters that I've written for my book, which is The Other EQ, How to Kill Boring Marketing. So with that said, take a listen to this on how to use podcasts over the course of months, like especially if you've had over 25 episodes, how do you use that to consolidate into larger bodies of work? Enjoy. Welcome to the 4am Report. On this podcast, we dish about fresh-pressed, fun marketing. If you're stressed out and awake at night again, wondering what to do, you found your joy. I'm your host, Susan Diaz, podcasting founder, humor junkie, observer of human behavior patterns, and mom. Each week, I'm joined by a different co-host to break down the latest headlines at the intersection of marketing and entertainment. Typically, with every episode of the podcast that you have the option of getting the transcript. Once you've gotten the transcript, what do you then do with it in order to reach a level of consolidation into a larger body of work? First things first, I wouldn't say you want to start this kind of thing when you're very early in your podcast journey. Like, don't start to think about consolidating unless it's for like a roundup email, right? That's the first of the possibilities for.
And what do you mean? Just so everyone understands, when you say roundup email, what do you mean?
So let's say we've produced 4 episodes of the podcast this month. You don't want to send individual notifications to people to say, my podcast episode is out. Instead, what you want to do is send them an email at the end of the month and say that this month we discussed A, B, C, and D.
It almost becomes like a newsletter with links out to your different podcasts. It almost
100%.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah. So that's the first level of consolidation. Over and above that, what you could be doing is taking those transcripts, auditing them. Like, let's say let's assume maybe 25 is like a minimum volume. If you've done about 25 episodes, then you want to audit that content and start to see if there's some patterns or themes or some specific things that interested people.
For instance, an example is when the pandemic hit and we went into lockdown, we kind of scrapped we had some guests lined up that we already had recorded we did release those eventually, but we leaned in and we did several episodes in a row on crisis communications, more emotional, intelligent marketing during a crisis. We did several episodes. Then after we had those, I think we said, hey, wait, all these episodes together, we've got the transcripts. Let's turn that into a little hub on our website. So I think we wrote a few pieces. We put together a how-to. I think we put together some emails, but we didn't start from scratch.
There was a crisis comms guide that it was like a little ebook, but again, it wasn't gated. It was just that anyone who needs this, go ahead and take it. So that's something to think about. Totally a great example there of how to just see the pattern of the moment and then use the content that you have. Now, even beyond that, other ways in which to use it is maybe research reports on the market. Like if you start to see a trend that 12 out of your 15 guests are in the restaurant industry and are people who have lost their job. Maybe there's some statistics you can provide, some in-depth learnings.
Yeah.
So those kind of white paper.
I think too, the longer you podcast, you learn how to almost, I don't want to say manipulate you plan out your themes. Like, let's say we have a
calendar.
Goal.
It's a calendar. You calendar it with a thoughtful,
Yeah. I think you get a lot more purposeful about what you're doing and what the purpose of each episode is. One way is, like we said, go back and look for themes, and otherwise create the themes as you go, knowing that you do want to maybe write a book, an ebook, something. So, we know we want to release a guide on X. Well, let's start talking about that on our podcast, because it's a way of almost workshopping X.
I love that. That's so well said, Will. It's like 100% that purposeful calendaring of material so that you're minimizing the amount of production and reproduction and sort of like doing it over and over. So that's certainly something that you want to think about as you put material together. So there we go. What do we have so far? We've talked about taking that transcript and using a roundup note. We've talked about content auditing it and seeing patterns to make longer pieces like white papers or longer blogs.
Yeah. Or website hubs.
Website hubs. And then, then research reports for trends that you're seeing in depth. You're not doing quantitative research with stuff like this. It's much more qualitative with the ability to quote actual people, obviously use permission and so forth. Hopefully you're already using permissions when you're publishing material from your guests, but that in general is the start of it. Now, beyond that, I'd say the holy grail of all of it is the book. The number of people who've taken like a critical volume of podcasts, like 50 or 75 or 100 episodes, and then converted those into books, actual publications that you can be known for.
It's so true. And I was just looking around for the book. It's there's a podcast, and it's about like city design, functional design, that was very popular. And this year they turned it into a lovely book all about appreciating the design, the simple design that makes the city work. And it all came from their podcast. It was inspired by the podcast. It came together. It's pretty critically acclaimed. It's a lovely example of how being passionate and knowing your niche, right? You think that is kind of a niche topic, but it's turned into a book that's actually ended up reaching a wider audience than I think the podcast did. So,
there you go. So never dismiss your podcast interviews or podcast episodes as one and done. There's two ways to approach them. You take it and you break it down into much smaller pieces. If you missed that episode, go back and listen to the last one. And then the other way is to consolidate your patterns and themes and create larger bodies of work. Thank you for listening to the 4 a.m. report. If you like what you're hearing, we'd love if you left us a 5-star review. Thank you.